Hi there, Cheryl Lampard here. I'm coming in just a bit earlier, hopefully. Yes. Hi, it's Cheryl here. Sorry, that's always a nerve-wracking moment there. So, it's Knitter Matters, it's episode 26. We'll start in a minute. I always like to come in a bit early because setting up this can be a bit of a task. Let me just turn that light up a bit, and hopefully I'll be able to see you coming in. So if somebody is watching and could just let me know if you can hear me, that would be wonderful. We've got another minute to go, so I hope you're all well. We have a massive thunderstorm a short while ago, so if there's a sudden rumble of thunder and I jump out my chair, don't be alarmed. It's Florida in monsoon season, or rainy season I should say. So, and we've had quite a lot of rain today. So, let me just check to see what's happening here. To see if I can see you on my screen to my right. So hopefully. Okay, well it is 7 o'clock now. So welcome indeed to Knitter Matters. I'm Cheryl Lampard of Style Matters International, and it's always a joy to welcome you to Knitter Matters. So welcome indeed, especially if you're a first-time viewer. If you've watched before, well, welcome again. It's always a joy to have you, whether you're watching live or the replay later. As I said, I'm Cheryl Lampard. My company is Style Matters International. I'm an image consultant, and I've also been a great knitter and sewer all my life. I was going to say a great knit. Well, I am a great knit, but I've been a great knitter all my life, and it's one of my wonderful passions, and it's my therapy. It's the thing I do every day, and I love doing it, and I know many of you do too. Anyway, I used to also be the proud owner of a yarn store called Yomo in Brighton, England, and one of the great joys of having a yarn store is that you get to be able to teach people how to knit. And all these decades later, I'm still teaching people how to knit, and it's even more enjoyable now, I think, because I can get this wonderful fibre art out to many more people via social media and online platforms such as Facebook. So this is the tricky bit now. So I'm going to move the camera, and just before we went live, I must tell you, the main light in my studio suddenly stopped working completely, and I just didn't have time to get up a ladder and put new light bulbs in. Anyway, I've sort of rigged everything up, more light. So if the lighting isn't so good this week, forgive me. And if you hear a crash, it's probably me tripping over the many wires that I have for the extra lights. Anyway, I'm going to move this camera now, and hopefully just bear with me, because this is where it takes a moment or two to get everything in the right place. So I'm hoping, and once I sit down, it's going to be easier. Oh, Lynn Haywood Grentel is watching. Thank you so much for participating. And Susan Burns, and I'm assuming that you can hear me okay. I hope so. Right. Okay, I'm going to take my seat, hopefully. Yeah, it's a weird angle, I know, that you're watching. And in future, we're going to try and rectify that. But it is what it is at the moment. So hopefully I can see what you see on my computer to the right. Let me get my hands in the right place, and I can see that's not quite right at the moment. I need to come over this way a bit, and okay, that looks as if it might be good. So this week is all about picking up stitches for neckbands. I'm going to move the phone over there because I can't see you coming up on that. So the last episode, we talked about V-neck bands, and I did say that this episode, and I showed you all these little sample V-necks, how to work them. There's different ways of doing them, some on circular needles and on straight needles, but I said that this week we talk about how to pick up the stitches. Now, there's various methods of doing it. You can do it with a needle, you can do it with a knitting needle, that is, you can do it with a crochet hook, and I'll be showing you both of those ways to doing it. But whichever way you do it, what you want when you're adding a neckband to a finished piece, you're aiming for a smooth, even join between the garment edge and the band. Now, it's easy enough picking up stitches around a straight edge, and I demoed in season 1, episode 35, how to do that on a cardigan edge, on a sample cardigan. You know, and that's easy enough, picking up stitches, although there's still things we pay attention. But when we're talking about shaped edges, they're a little bit trickier, as we have a few other things to deal with. I've got a couple of samples here. These are like my little mock sweaters. This is the V-neck piece that you saw me do the front part of last time. I've now done a little back to it. I've done actually a short back because I was doing this today and I just didn't have time to do the whole length of it, but never mind. It's a high-low jumper, this one, a high-low sweater. Oh, I know you don't say jumper in the US, do you? Say sweater. Sorry, some of my UK terminology coming out there. But whether it's a jumper, a sweater, a cardigan, whatever, you're going to have to do a neckband at some point. So I've got this sample here, and you'll see that this one is joined at both shoulders. So I'm going to need to use either a circular needle or DPNs to knit the band on this one. This other sample, I've only joined one shoulder, and that's how I can knit the band flat. I can actually pick up the stitches and knit the band flat if I would rather do that, or maybe I don't have a circular or DPNs. Either way, the techniques for picking up the stitches are pretty much the same. And I'm going to show you both ways to do this, or two of the ways to do this, I should say. But there are some basics, and they're the same whether you're picking up with a circular needle, a crochet hook, or whether you're doing it with flat needles, or straight needles, I should say, on a flat piece of knitting, as it were. So you always pick up from the right side. We're going to be working around the right side, okay? And unless your design says otherwise, I should put that as a caveat, because you may have a design where you're doing a neckband from the other side and then doing something fancy to join it or stitch it down on the right side. But normally you pick up from the right side. You're also going to be making actual knit stitches along the edge. You're not just picking up strands and using these. You're not picking up stitches and using those. You are picking up the stitches, but you're knitting, you're using a separate strand of yarn and you're pulling that through. And I'll show you that in a moment. But you generally don't use the strands here as the pickups, if that makes sense, because you're going to stretch them, you're going to get holes. I did say straight, circular or crochet hook to pick up stitches, but one of the things you need to remember, you want to use a needle or a hook, probably 1 or 2 sizes smaller for picking up. That's because it's a lot easier. If you're trying to work your way around the neckband, you're using exactly the same size needle as the piece that you've worked, it's much harder to do, and you do run the risk of sort of stretching out the stitches, especially if you have to pull some stitches out or pull out the picking. Oh, that's a tongue twister. Pull out the picking up stitches. If you have to do that a couple of times and you're using a same size needle, then you might stretch out your stitches, and then you're going to get sort of a more holey look. So you would pick up using 1 or 2 sizes smaller, then change to the needle size required. Now, let's say you wanted a different color band. Let's say you wanted a contrast like this on your sweater or whatever it is. You know, which is a really nice touch. You could do the cuffs and the neck bands in a different color. I really quite like that look. But if you're going to do that, and it's just as easy, but one tip I would give you is to pick up the color, pick up the stitches rather, in the same color as the main body of the piece, and then change to the colour when you do your first row. That way, if there's any, it's going to be a really seamless blend then between, seamless join between the neckband and the main body. So good tip that if you're using a different colour, you want a different colour neckband, pick up the stitches with the main colour and then go to your different colour for the first row. But whatever the shape of the neckline, the stitches need to be picked up evenly. And sometimes a pattern may state the number of stitches to pick up. So what you would do then is mark them every 2 inches or so. I've done this because this is such a small sample. I've sort of roughly marked every inch, and I've just put in little, I'm going to take them out as I pick the stitches up, but they're just little yarn ties. That's all I've done, and every inch or so. So if you know how many stitches are to be picked up round the neck, you can mark your way round in 2-inch segments, and then you would divide that number of stitches between the sections. So you know, however many stitches you need between the 2 ties, that would be the same for this part, then this part, then this part. Now, and sometimes the patterns are very good. They actually tell you exactly how many to go down the left side of the neck, across and up. But if they don't, then I would mark them out. And it's still a good thing to do to make sure you get them done evenly. Now, sometimes the pattern just says pick up evenly, and it doesn't give you a number of stitches to pick up. Well, again, this is where marking your sections comes in really easy. So I've chosen to do it with these little yarn ties, but you could just bits of contrast yarn, but you could just as easily use these stitch markers and use the ones that you can clip onto your knitting. So use those. You could peg those all the way around if you wanted to. So there's several ways to do that if you want. One other thing that I do want to say before I actually show you how to pick up the stitches is this, and I think it's a really good tip. So before you even start to think about picking up stitches, when you're actually making up the garment, don't do the decreases right on the edge. You know, I think we've all done that, especially when we're learning to knit. The pattern just says decrease 1 stitch at the end of, or at the neck edge, every other row or every 4 rows, whatever. They'll often say decrease 1 stitch at the neck edge, whether you're going purl side round or knit side round. But I would advise you not to do that decrease right on the edge. Why would I say that? Well, when you do a decrease, however smooth it may be, you're going to get a little bit of a lump because you're combining 2 stitches into 1. When you do it right on the edge, you really do get a sort of a knobble. Is that a word, a knobble? But anyway, you get a little bump. That's much harder to pick up smoothly along. I would suggest doing your decrease at least 1 stitch in. I've done it here 1 stitch away from the edge stitch. You could just as easily do it 2 stitches away and make a feature of it. Here I've done right leaning decreases. This side I've done left leaning decreases. I think it looks really nice around the neckband. It adds a sort of a more, if you will, sort of couture touch, a knitting couture touch. I do think it's very nice. And sometimes those decreases you can make a real feature of. You can actually have them further away and then do some other stitches in between. But if your pattern just says decrease at the neck edge, I would just go 1 stitch away from that. Now, if that's going to affect, if you've got a particularly tricky design, it's going to affect the pattern, the actual look of the design, then you might have to just practice that and do that as a sample swatch, see how it looks. But it is worth keeping those decreases away from the edge. Okay, so let's start with our V-neck. I have, as I said, I have joined both shoulders there, and rather than use a circular, I'm just going to use DP ends because I don't want the cable of the circular getting in the way. There's enough going on under this camera at the moment, so I don't want that getting in the way of your view. So let me pick a colour to pick up on. So I'm going to start picking up at the right back neck. Remember, it's going to be facing me. My right side is going to be facing me. Now I would, if I was starting this completely and going all the way around, I would obviously start over here, come down, go across. For the interest of time, because I want to sort of show you what happens down here, I'm going to start somewhere in the middle. But if this was a garment for sure, for real, you'd be starting over here and then coming around. I'm just going to start way over here. And I just want to show you, hope you can see that okay. Let me turn that light up a little so that you can, hopefully, right. I hope you can see that. So I'm going to use a contrast yarn so that you can see it. So what I'm doing here, I've got a needle that's actually 2 sizes smaller. And what you don't want to do is go through just this part of the stitch where you've got a bound off edge, which I have here for the back neck. I don't want to be doing that, and I don't want to be doing that, because if I do that, I'm stretching out the stitch and I'm going to get an uglier join. I'm going to get sort of a holier join. You want to go through the 2 parts of the stitch, if you will. You'll see, once I get going, you'll see that first, oh, of course, the first, lights going, yarn bouncing out of my hand. I don't know what's happening today. It's this storm. Okay, let me get going. This is always the trickiest. Right, first stitch, there we go. Okay, now I can get going. I'm not going to do any knots or anything like that. I'm just going to keep this out the way with my fingers. So I'm trying to hold this so you can see it. So I would just pick up 1 stitch along all my bound off stitches. Now again, follow your pattern. Some patterns will say pick up every bound off stitch. Some will say you know, miss one every now and then. Sometimes it's easier to pick up all the stitches and then do a decrease row. Now here we have, because we had a change from the bound off going into the fabric again and doing decreases on the next row, I've got a bit of a gap here. I really don't want to go in there because that's going to give me a hole. So I'm going to pick up the stitch the other side of it. And you see now that hole has disappeared. Let me just take that out and show you. So when you get this sort of thing, and you do get that sometimes, you just can't help it sometimes, don't go into that stitch. If you need to make up the number of stitches, what I would suggest is just go into just make an increase. So instead of going in there, we're going into the other side of it. So effectively we're picking up a stitch either side of the holy bit, and we're picking up that. If you really need to add a stitch, you can do an increase. You can either do it on this row, the picking up row, or on the row that you're coming back on. It depends what if it's going to affect your ribbing, you probably want to do the increase along here, and you could actually do it on this stitch and then go over here. So just be aware to avoid holes. You don't want to go into a hole. That sort of sounds a bit obvious, but you know what I'm saying. So now we're this is a tricky bit because we've got the seam there, which is a bit bouncy. Okay, now here we go. We're going on down the front now. So now again, sometimes when you're going on a V-neck, your pattern might tell you not to pick up every knitted row. Just for the purposes of showing pickup stitches, I'm going to do that. But sometimes it'll say pick up 3 stitches for every 4 rows. So you're going to miss a row somewhere, because otherwise you can get a band that's really it's too stretchy. It's going to have too many stitches, and you don't want that. So I'm going to actually scoot past that one, pick that one up. Again, you can see how evenly you're picking them up as you go. I'm probably going to miss one there. and go in there, and so on and so on. So I'm just gonna scoot. I'm gonna take, okay, I'm just gonna, yeah, no, okay, I'll carry on. I'm just gonna leap ahead a bit, and I'm gonna jump a few stitches here, only because I want to get to that V point. I'm doing every other one at the moment just so I can get to the V, because I'm not really going to do anything special there, except I would need to change my needle. And in fact, if I was doing this, what I should do, if I was doing the whole of the back, I would have one DPN across the back, one down the left front, then I would have one going up the right front. So this is my, yeah, that's my last actual stitch that I'm picking up there. You know, I'm just going to get rid of these ones on the back because I want that needle to lie a bit flatter. Okay, then I would just pick up with another DPN, or of course if it's a circular, you're going to be using a circular. Now, depending on your pattern, you might have a stitch there if you've got, or your pattern might say pick up a center stitch. Follow what your pattern says. For the moment, I'm just gonna show you how to keep going without, and again, I'm going to leap ahead. I'm going to do every other one just so, and you'll see that I'm going in that very edge stitch. I'm picking up the 2 bars, if you will, of that edge stitch. Again, I know this is not a bound off edge like the back is, but you don't want to just be picking up that bit or that bit. You want the whole 2 bars, if you will. You want the whole stitch. You won't get holes then. If you do this, you will. If you do that, you will. But if you pick up both parts of the stitch, and again, I'm leaping way up. I'm not picking up nearly enough, but I just want to get to the top, if you will. You would pick up more than that probably. And then you can see, whoops. Okay, do that one again. I split my yarn there. And if you have got a bumpy bit, you can, you know, the joy of picking, here we go. I've got a bumpy bit here, and you just have to sort of negotiate round it. But, you know, you can easily just pull it out again and then see, you know, do you like it there? Does it look worse there or not? Okay. So now we're going to go just on the straight here. You're trying to avoid bumps. You want it to be as smooth as possible. Just those edge stitches. Okay, right. That's enough to show you. So if I was doing this on DPNs, I would have one across the back, one down the left front, and one going up the right front. But you get the idea. And then you can start doing your ribbing and so on and so on. And then eventually you'll end up with your neckband, hopefully looking something like that, or however you want it to be, or the pattern says it should be. Okay, I'm going to take these out. I might need them again. Now let me show you on this one. So this is the a curved neckline, okay? And again, I've just done one shoulder seam here, and it could be because I don't like using DPNs or circulars. It could be that I don't have them to hand. So there is certainly a way that you can do it with knitting flat with straight needles. So what I would do here, I would seam the left shoulder and I would leave the right shoulder open. You can do it the other way, but then you're going to have to start from that way around and go around the front first. And I always think it's nicer to go around the back first, because you can sort of get into your rhythm then. And if it's a bit dodgy when you start off, by the time you get round here and down here, you're going to be in your sort of rhythm, and it gives you a bit of practice, if you will. So, and then what you would do when you knit up, once you've picked up, you would knit your band, and then you would seam that shoulder and the neckband in one. Okay, so let's get another colour. I'm going to do this actually with a crochet hook, I think. I did say that you could do it with crochet hooks, so that's what we're going to do. Right, this one is 2 sizes smaller, so let's try that. I'm going to, okay, I'll start right at the top here. So what you would do with your crochet hook, and you might actually find that easier anyway. So you would, it's a bit fiddly because you're going to need to sort of transfer them to your needle. Okay. If I was using a straight crochet hook, I could probably get several on my needle and then transfer them. Sorry, several on my hook and then transfer them, but I've got a curvy shaped crochet hook here, so I'm going to just be able to, I'm going to do them one at a time. Let's see where that baby's going. There we go. So this is a good example of, it would be very easy there to just pick up that loop, but if I do that, I'm going to get an ugly kind of extended stitch. So, and again, once you get going with this, let me pull that out the way so you can see. Once you get going with this, it's a lot easier. Okay, so I've got 2 now, 2 stitches. And I'm a bit cack-handed here, but I want to get my yarn wrapped around my other hand, but I don't want it to get in the way of what you can see. So I'm going to just take this little knot out now so that you can see better. But I wouldn't normally do that until I'd actually got the right number of stitches on my needle. So now it's going to be a bit easier on the bound off edges. Now, one of the things you can do is, normally we would, I mean, you can do it either way. You can go under the 2 loops of the bound off edge, but what I sometimes do, and I think can be neater, is to go actually in the stitch. So what I mean by that, here, it would be very easy just to follow my loops there. And you can do that, but if I do that there, I'm going to get a bit of a hole. I hope you can see that okay. Can you see that okay? If I come up a bit higher, I want to avoid that. So if I go actually into the, if you can see the stitch formation, it's a V. If I go there, I go straight into the middle of the stitch rather than the side of it. Okay. I'm just checking that you can see that. Let me get it on the hook and then you can see. So I'm literally going in the middle of the V. And again, you can play about with this, see which you like better. As long as you get the correct number of stitches on your needle. Okay. So to show you again, and again, I would have to transfer these off the crochet hook onto my needle, but just for the sake of expediency, as we are coming up to the half hour, I'm going to lift this right up so you can see. Go into the middle of the V if you can. It's a really nice, you get a very nice picked up edge then. Okay. I won't say it's almost seamless, but it sort of is, especially if you're doing it in the same colour. So you see how nicely it sort of grows out of that stitch. And you would just keep going round. Again, I would need to put these on my needle. This is where one of those sort of steel crochet hooks, the sort that I have, that my grandmother gave me when I was a young girl, that I still have, come in handy because you can just slide them then along. So to do it with a crochet hook, it's that way, but you can do the same thing if you're just picking up with your needle. I'm going to go into the center of that V and pick up my stitch, and so on and so on. Okay. And you know, once you've done a row, like here, there's a gap there, but you know, once you've done a row, that's probably gonna bunch up nicely. That's going to, once you get the stitches going, once you get the knitted stitches going, that's going to disappear. Let me just do a few more and then I'll do a couple more right in the middle of that stitch, right in the middle, right in the middle. Again, you've got to follow what your pattern says, and it is easier to pick up when you have bound off edges. So that's another reason why you want to start at the back, really, because by the time you get round to the front, you know what you're doing. Now here again, we've got this loop here because we've jumped from the bound off to the main body. I'm going to miss that and just go straight over here. You don't even see it now. So I'll show you again. That hole there, I don't want that. I'm going to skip that. I'm going to go there. If I need to make up a stitch, I could easily, if I wanted to, just do an increase there, skip that one, go there, okay, or increase on the way around. And now I would carry on and so on. Let's take that out. Sorry, I'm holding this at a really odd position. Okay, instead of taking that out, I'm just going to, oh, I will have to take it out, otherwise it won't be. So again, and where you get the sort of bump where you've got a shoulder seam, you just have to kind of wiggle your needle in a bit, and there we go. And here we go down the sides again. And again, I'm just gonna leap ahead and miss a few. Exactly the same as we did for the V-neck. And you can see you can do that either with a crochet hook or a needle. But what you're doing when you get flat, when you're picking up the stitches flat, it's going to look a bit weird on your needle. It's all going to be sort of bunched up here. But by the time you've done a few rows of rib, it's all going to even out. Okay. So I do hope that makes sense. I'm sorry that the camera angle was a bit awkward, but sorry, just having to manage how I can. I don't have my cameraman at the moment, and I just had to move things around a bit. So hopefully you could see that, but you can see there what's happening. The stitches are all being picked up. It's just what you're doing is laying that out flat. And you can equally well do that with a V-neck. Just because this is a curved neckline, it makes no difference. Just remember not to sew up the right shoulder, and that's the right one when you're wearing it, as it were. So if it was a V-neck, wouldn't be any different. You're still picking up from the back, down the front, and then up again. And once, you know, if it's on a straight needle, it's just going to look a bit weird on the needle, but that's the only difference. You're still going to get your ribbed band. Okay, so I hope that made sense to you, and I hope that was helpful. Gosh, I've got so much yarn on the floor now. Right, I'm just going to whiz backwards, and hopefully I'll be able to lift you up, so without getting my thumb right over the camera, which I just did, and I'm sorry about that. You'd think I'd know how to do this by now, wouldn't you? Oh well. Yeah. Okay, but I just don't like I like to say goodbye to you actually looking at you. See, my iPad wants to fall forward. Stay there. Okay, there we go. Oh, top of my head. Oh well, can you see? What have I done there? There's something going on there. Oh, hang on. Sorry. Oh, gosh. I pressed something there. Oh, me and technology at times. Okay. Right, well, I hope that was helpful. If you have any questions on that, do please put them in the thread below. I promise to answer them as soon as I can. I hope that made sense. I know the picture wasn't as close as I would like it to be. I just can't get the camera down over my shoulder enough. When I have my cameraman back, we'll be fixing that, but I hope it still makes sense to you. Anyway, as always, this episode and all others are uploaded to our Facebook page afterwards and our YouTube channel. This episode is season 2, episode 26, and it is called Picking Up Neckband Stitches. Hope you enjoyed it, hope it was helpful, and I will see you next time, but in the meantime, stay well, stay safe, and stay knitting. Bye for now.